All right, Daniel, I am super stoked. I want to thank you for joining us here on Creative Survival. I'm going to toss it to you just to get the audience to kind of get to know you a little more because we used to be roommates and
And we
know each other pretty well, but the people watching are like, who's this bearded guy talking to the other bearded guy?
I actually just told the most embarrassing story ever of the hey, why does my leg hurt? Phone call. You know? Yeah, not my
Yes.
shining moments, but anyway, so yeah, I'm Daniel Jacobs. I kind of worn a lot of hats over the years. Most of my personal career, I've had two things going on. I've had my spiritual life and whatever that looks like, and then kind of my other life, for lack of better words. I grew up in a home with a mom who's pretty well known in her certain Christian circles, and I guess you kind of learn from a pretty early age how to kind of create a version of yourself that is okay. It's like it's not the version of who I am. It's not who I think I am. It's who you think I am. So kind of
Totally.
learn the nuances of how to have that dance. And so as life kind of progressed, I was trying to follow these two paths, and so I would kind of jump back and forth. By the time I was like 15, I was traveling internationally and on, prayer teams of like 50 chosen delegates from around the world and praying on the Capitol steps and, speaking in Argentina and Australia and Colombia and all these things. And on the other hand, I'm the guy who's at the back of the church laughing and cracking jokes, and those were both completely me, so I guess I've always tried to keep those separate, but I guess for the first time, I'm kind of admitting they collide. So I guess this is a very long-winded way of saying I'm kind of in this liminal transition period where all of these different versions of myself, both personally and even in work, have kind of collided and kind of creating something new and beautiful. But it's very early, so that was it's the best I can do at this point as an intro into who I am and where I'm at.
I'm curious how, like, even looking like where you're at now in this like new stage of intersection, and like looking back at even like when we were roommates or prior, like what did keeping those two worlds and those two versions of you separate do for like identity and even just expressions and creativity?
Well, the thing was, neither one was true. Neither one was authentic, not fully. Um, and it was so hard to track down because it wasn't like any major differences. It's not like your average person would never know, but it was like millions of little decisions or micro decisions or things I wouldn't check. I was so afraid of conflict at any level that it was like, you tell me 2 plus 2 is 5, and I'm like, that's good for you, buddy. That's awesome, and I just didn't. Um, so it has identity is something that I'm just probably now at 38 feel like I'm really feels like my 20s was trying to kind of fake it till you make it, and kind of like I was acting out of what I knew to be true, and I was even tapping into further truth, but it wasn't quite in me yet. I wasn't living it. I was more collecting it, and then making it look at all of my amazing books I have on the wall. I must be, but it wasn't. I hadn't transitioned a lot of. I mean, honestly, I hadn't transitioned a lot of what I used to travel and speak in for myself because I had no how can you have a genuine love for others if you don't love who you are? And if you're not walking out of who you are as a person in a genuine way, then you won't love yourself. You know, I don't know if that answers your question or not.
No, totally. And it's interesting, like, talking about being able to love yourself, because it's true. If you, even if you don't realize, like, you harness, like, hatred towards yourself or some kind of resentment towards yourself, like, that spills out onto other people. And then in the industry that we work in, especially when we first met,
Sure.
that tends to be the norm. So then you're with people who are doing the same thing, and that just seems normal, kind of like reinforces your lifestyle. For you, being in the industry that we were, and having to do that hustle and like playing the game, like for you, did that worsen the
I think it actually was helping to break me out of some of it.
interesting?
Although there were the two.
Mm-hmm.
it really was a world where I felt like I could just be me and have my shit, and no one expected me to be whatever. And then
Uh-huh.
the other hand, where it was like this hyper spiritual world where I'm like the double portion, you know, like when I walk down the hallway and you know, and crowds follow me when I'm in Christian service and try and touch me or like touch my children. It's so weird. It is weird. It's like this. I joke around all the time and say, oh, it's like Christian royalty or something because of the way people act. But yeah, you know, it's really the same. It's the same illusion in both. It's they're trying to sell a narrative that really to me is escapism. It's a world of shoulds, it's a world of oughts, and it's a world of appearances. On one hand, it's like the blatant this is what it is. On the other hand, it's a appearance of evil. So you know, and it's a really easy, really sneaky way of kind of justifying, almost condemning someone as guilty before they've even committed a crime. You know, it's the old Billy Graham rule in the '60s. You know, a man and woman, and it makes sense on paper. You're like, well, yeah, I understand because of whatever else. It's like, but are you really thinking about the narrative it's creating and what that's saying about people and the message that's sending? And
Mm-hmm.
so, so yeah, I guess for me, it really, in a weird way, even though it was so crazy and whatever, it kind of helped me provide a place for me to work my shit out and people who didn't expect me to have any answers.
That's nice. How about now? Like now, you have a wife, you have a family, kids, and then you're
Yeah.
also working in like a creative field running things, but within like the church. Like, how does that play out? Because I know you're going through some transitions right now.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, we could say it. It's okay. You know, so uh, I think it was about 6 or 7 years ago. Obviously, you know, with my background in, you know, well, I guess I haven't even said that. You know, my background was primarily in post production, but kind of a bit of a jack of all trades. Obviously, not on your level, but you know, somewhere in there. It paid the bills okay. And so my parents, you know, I said they're, you know, fairly well known in the Christian world. They've had a TV show that they've done on different Christian networks for years, and they were just like, I don't know what's going on with the ministry. It's just not working, and this and that. And I'm looking at them going like, they've put 30 plus years into this. You know, they've literally, you know, wrong, right, whatever, are some of the most like real, genuine, live what they say people I've ever met. And I'm going, you guys have no retirement. You're not paying yourself. You're just paying your staff. That doesn't work long term. You know, you have to get paid too. You know. So they kind of talked to me and they're like, why don't you come out and see? And I'm going, I know you're trying to work me. I get it. I get it. You know, because I'm like, I'm a dad too. You know, but it's not going to happen because why would I ever move to Texas to work for you in a ministry when I finally have my career that I'm developing, right? But I'm like, all right, I'll come out. Next thing you know, I'm living here and I was running the media, and then over time it's kind of progressed from running media to then becoming the vice president and basically we're kind of running the day to day of the operation. So yeah, it's almost kind of like all my worlds have collided in an interesting way, in a way that I would have never imagined.
And I know we talked about this before I started recording. Like on paper, according like if most people looked at it, they're like, oh, he took major steps back. Like, and it's not like, to clarify to the audience, it's not like you were like starving and you're running around as like a PA. Like you
Right.
were doing legit work, and then just kind of like almost like put it on pause.
It
For
was terrifying.
you,
Yeah.
like for you, what role has that played just personally and even professionally, like in your growth?
On paper, it was, yeah, it felt like the worst decision I could ever make for all of the above reasons. You know, I was finally kind of beginning to develop my own sense of self and really finding kind of having a space where it felt safe for me, where I wasn't in the Christian public eye to begin to really take a look at myself and ask myself the questions of what do I believe, not what should I believe, not what should I ought to do, where do I actually stand today? What do I believe for me and why? What would I really die for? You know, I'm going to tangent here for a second, but you know, when we're growing up, there was always that narrative of like one of these, it's like a martyrdom was like something was just from childhood. It's like if anyone ever puts a gun to my head and says, would you deny Jesus? You know, and I'm like, never, you know, never. And it's so funny how it's changed because now I'd be like, sure, yeah, okay, and then go home to my wife and kids and not think twice about the guy that had a gun to my head, But like, it's a worst case scenario that almost becomes like fantasized about, But to me, it felt like I was kind of doing that for real, and it didn't make sense on paper. My wife was pregnant with our third child. It was a difficult pregnancy. I was going back and forth to Texas. Um, I don't think I did a great job at that transition, to be honest. I felt like it's so hard because it's not, when you're not like in your mind, you're saying, I'm not a deadbeat. I'm actually someone who's like doing everything I can, but getting to the point where you're not so wrapped up in whatever it is that you're doing that you're neglecting what matters. So having a family thankfully grounded me as I kind of came back into this whole scenario. So, um, yeah, it's honestly the best thing that could have ever happened in my life on so many levels because it's very rare that anyone actually gets to be in a business situation where you have an organization that's 30 plus years old and someone just hands you the reins and says, what do you need to do? You know? And I'm going, wait, I'm a production guy. Hold on. I don't know marketing and, and all these different kind of decisions. And I didn't know what P&Ls were or, it's like, hold on a second. So, so, but that's where, it is like we talked about earlier, but that is where the lack of comfort, we're so used to seeking comfort, but man, all the growth is on the other side, in being willing to get out of our comfort zone and grow. So, on levels that I can't even begin to imagine yet, the last 5 years has done that. So, did I tell you that I started speaking again?
No.
That was a big part of all this for me that really messed me up because, like my wife for a long time would be like, when am I ever going to hear you speak? And I'm like, you'll never hear me speak. It's probably on DVD, so we can go and look and you can watch the DVD of me speaking in the product room, but you're not going to see, because I just didn't feel like I had anything to say that, I felt like there was nothing special about me, but beyond that, I didn't have anything really that special to say.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt really uncomfortable about the Jacob's narrative of what that could create and what people's expectations were and the position they would hold me in. And I was always afraid as a kid that I'd fall into pride and then think it was about me. And
mm-hmm.
So just for so many reasons, I was just I didn't, between feeling like I didn't have anything to offer anyone and everything else. I was pretty scared. But I said, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to be authentic. And so what I did is I set up these events with my mom. So I said, no one's going to come for me. But what if we do these events called like these breakthrough gatherings? We limit it to like 200 people. And we say the goal of this, the actual metric, not the metric on paper, but the actual goal is how do we create the biggest impact on every individual who comes here as possible? And so my mom would spend sessions talking to them and basically walking them through, kind of inner healing and their past and their thought process. And then at the end of the day, she would just kind of hand the mic to me. I don't even have words to tell you how life-changing it was for me because this is my mom's audience, like literally her right down the line demographic, literally, who has no idea they're there for me. And I get up and I start talking about, in 2001 when my car almost flew off a cliff and being suicidal and questioning God and not fitting in church. Basically just painting a picture of suffering and just saying, listen, I feel like the church tries to create this release, this excuse, this freedom from, if you follow Jesus, everything, and if everything is wrong, if anything is wrong in your life is the enemy, anything that is good is God. And I'm getting up there going, I don't know anything. I said, listen, on paper, what I'm saying to you should be really depressing, but he started sharing about making the suffering worth it, saying, I don't know why I struggle with the things I do. I don't know why I've had to go through the things I have or what they've gone through, but make it mean something,
Mm-hmm.
take that suffering and then, and think about those nights when you cried yourself to sleep and said, why won't someone, whatever, channel that and you be that. Find someone, take all of that feeling you have of the frustration and your questions and your doubts and channel that into being that solution for someone else, even if you don't have the answer for yourself.
Yeah, because you could at
So,
least be the support.
and it was the craziest thing, man. The first time I did it, I had this woman walk in. She was like 75. She had like a brooch, and she said, I had a plan to kill myself next week. And if you picked that room and said, out of these 200 people, pick who's, she probably would have been my last choice. So I guess to take this full circle, the most liberating thing was me realizing that there wasn't anything special about the words that I was saying. There wasn't anything particularly life-changing about the life that I've lived. It was just me being willing to step up and tap into who I am authentically and just speak my truth, my imperfect truth, my broken truth, but being willing to say, I'm not okay all the time, and it's okay. And it's okay if you're not too. And it's sad that that is such a counterculture thought to Christians who are basing their lives on a God who died for us, realizing that the people I thought would reject me the most actually embrace me, then threw me on this whole other level where I'm going, man, these people that I would have always assumed would reject me if I was real are hugging me. They're crying. They're sharing with their life just because I was willing to let my guard down. I'm really good at reading people, really good. And I think. But what I realized is I was so good at that I never, ever gave people a chance. So really, when you asked what it was like growing up with those two, it was lonely. Because no one really knew me. Mm-hmm. I never allowed people, though. I never gave people the opportunity because I was so afraid of being wounded that I couldn't open myself up.
I think that's really powerful because I think a lot of us, and I think anyone watching could relate to that. Like you have that wall. Like, if you've ever created anything, when you put that out in public, like, that alone is vulnerable. But then when you go to someone and try to invest time and build a relationship of any kind, friendship, marriage, dating, like, it doesn't matter, even family. Like, you go through a family that tears you down daily and just verbally abuses you, like, that builds up. And to be able to recognize and break those walls down is, I think, one of the most important and, like, healthy things you can do as a person. Yeah. And like to know, like you said, there's nothing special about your story, but to you it's not special because you've lived it. And comparatively, when someone's like, I was in Uganda and they cut my family up, and like you're like, oh, that's an insane story. Like I'm not on that level. But not everyone has to be. Like, hey, I struggled with suicide. I struggle with depression. I've been so pissed at God, like I've wanted to walk away. Like, you share things like that, and then people go, oh, I have too. And then you realize, like, oh, I'm not alone. And to them, your story is special because it unlocks something inside them. And they're like, oh, I can actually share this with other people. Like, that's a thing that people could do. Yeah. And I don't think a lot of people realize that. Like, to be able to find your own voice, I think is very important.
I think it's one of the most important things we can do. I think that's the core. You tapped into it. It ties into creativity and everything else. It's about risk. It's about vulnerability, and it's about expressing your true self in some way. And I really think that might be why. It's at least why I'm less afraid of falling into pride or whatever now is because I'm realizing that when you come from a place of just raw reality, then you're met on a level, when I was speaking in Florida, when I had this one, it was the weirdest, this never happened to me anywhere. This woman stands in the middle of the aisle right in front of me, and I'm not done speaking. and she just comes up and gives me a hug. Wow. And I'm holding her, and she's holding me, and it didn't feel like, bless you, child. Here, let me impart to you. It felt like two human beings imparting into each other. And then next thing I know, there was another person. And next thing you know, there's a line of people down the aisle, and I'm just hugging people. And so here's kind of my dilemma with everything, because for the longest time I didn't feel God anymore. Mm-hmm. I actually haven't felt God in the way that I felt God. Probably 15 years, and I remember I would cry myself to sleep every night. I mean, I literally, like, every night. Yeah. and say, if you're a God of love, if you're a father, how can a father who would send his son to die for me allow me to sit here in this? And I know, and you go through all the excuses, listen for the still small voice, and maybe God's teaching you through the silence, and
Yeah.
maybe fasting and prayer, maybe it's deliverance, and maybe it's generational sin. Like I know it all, and so I would run. I said it was almost like being in the dark and just running as hard as you could in one direction and hoping you're getting closer, but not knowing. And you're like, okay, that didn't work.
Yeah.
What about is it something in my thought life? And you run in that direction and like all the directions. So basically, I kind of ran out of all the directions that the textbook gave me. I tried them all. I tried fasting and prayer. Nothing ever worked. And then I remember reaching a point where I was like, even if I never hear your voice again, I believe. And I guess that's kind of still where I am. I really, and even talking to you, honestly, I wish I could say like I'm more whatever than I am, or closer to who I used to be, because it's uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
and it's unsettling. I mean, even talking to you about the stuff that I am, is stuff I've been kind of trying to figure out how do I do, because it's so easy. It would be so easy from the outside to paint a narrative of like, the jaded son of course, or and all these things,
Sure.
or the other side trying to use me against actually. So I had a conversation with my mom, probably about 4 months ago, maybe longer now, and so I asked, we were gonna have a family meeting, and I asked her to come early, by herself, and she came. I locked the door of my bedroom, and I just started crying. And I told her, you raised me to be this person who seeks after truth and God and stands for what I believe. And I'm afraid that as I've gone down those paths, it's led me to different places than you. And I'm afraid me being authentic to who I am and how I see God will feel like a betrayal to you. But I also told her in that conversation, I said, if anyone ever tries to use me as a narrative against you, I will burn it all down. Because I said, I won't do that. And it'd be so easy. It's like we mentioned before we started recording, but in my life, there's two easy paths. There's not one. The easy path, number one, would be just to kind of remain silent about some of my doubts, just enough that I still remain edgy and kind of that guy, but could still fit within mainstream.
Uh-huh.
And just because my last name is Jacobs means I could reach literally millions of people around the world. I mean, I was speaking internationally by the time I was 15. It wouldn't be hard for me to go down that road.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, the road could be, well, I don't fit within this, so I'm going to step away from everything, and I think what I'm learning is neither one was really who I was. They both were. They're no matter what I try to do, no matter who I am, no matter what my beliefs change, everything will always be in response to the faith that I was handed. It maybe I'm asking those new questions to those traditions, but I've gone to countless years of ministry school. I would study. 7 or 8 different Bibles with the, Hebrew concordance and, chronological Bibles and dates reference, and, they were really looked amazing and well worn and read through. And I went to the ministry schools, and I was kicked out of the ministry schools. And neither way. If I step away, it's not being authentic either. It's like it's just something that I have to wrestle with. And I always kind of find the irony in the fact that my last name is Jacob, and I'm a little gimpy, got to walk with a limp.
Yeah.
So, but I think that's what I'm meant to do. I want to. And if nothing else, the most freeing thing is realizing that I don't have to be anything other than just allow others to see me struggle.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like I haven't arrived. I'm nowhere near. I don't even know what arrived looks like.
I think anyone who has arrived should be avoided. Honestly.
I think what's that quote that I always think about? I can't recall who said it, but we're all just walking each other home.
I like that.
And I'm not trying to create a platform or anything else for any other reason that So how do it's like what do you do when these two things are true? What does it look to be authentically this weird Christian thing, and then this other part that like makes fun of that weird Christian thing, and those are both true.
Yeah. And I think that's important, like to come full circle, is like you were saying with identity and finding your voice. Like if you can't have that community or that group of people to be able to open up to and be vulnerable with and let them know you, then you won't have someone to speak into your life. And if you don't have people who truly know you to speak those truths into your life, then all you're going to have is yourself and like anything external just speaking into you, and nothing's going to be able to cut that chatter. So it's just that, that internal beating that we can give each other, especially as creatives. It becomes the narrative rather than having people who can truly see all of your faults and all of your gifts and look at that and be like, hey, Daniel, like, you are strong. You're a great family man. Like, you're an amazing human being who just has a huge heart for people and, like, can really speak into that and show you stuff that you might not even want to admit to yourself. And, like, if you have that twisted view of your own identity, then I think it just spills out in every part of our life. And a lot of people just get stuck on that. It's like that hamster wheel effect, right?
Yeah. Honestly, man, that's why I had the conversation. It wasn't because I was brave. It was with my mom. I was desperate. I mean, honestly, man, in the midst of everything, in the last 2 years, I think this Sunday is 2 years ago to the day I had a stroke.
That's crazy. It's been that long?
Yeah, it's gone quick. And either that or there's the brain damage is messing the years up.
Yeah, it was like 3 months ago.
So, and then right after that, we had we've had 3 children. We've never had any, we've always been very blessed when it comes to babies. Like, it was never a struggle for us to have kids, or never had it, and then we had 3, and then my wife got pregnant right after, had going everything on. We took our children to the doctor with us to hear their new siblings' heartbeat for the first time, and there was none. On Christmas Day, we found out my wife was struggling with all of her health issues. And then, it's just been, it's been rough. But the beauty of it is because, like, I had it brought me to the point where I had to admit that I couldn't do it alone. Mm-hmm. And that I needed help. And, I think sometimes, it's like people say, the brokenness or the pain that we have wasn't created in isolation, and it's not healed in isolation. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I guess one of the biggest things for me at this point is realizing how deeply I need community, how deeply I need people who I can just be me with, who I can feel like I can let my guard down with.
Yeah.
How badly I need that, and so I was at a point, honestly, man, I was pretty close to. I was probably the most suicidal I've ever been last year. Wow. Like to the point where I was going to the therapist, and he had me, remove my guns from the house. It was, it was pretty serious, But I realized part of what was going on with me is I was trying so hard to please everyone in my life and be the version of me they needed. So who do my kids need to be? Okay, I'll be that. Mm-hmm. Who does my wife need me to be? Okay, I'll be that. Who does my parents need me to be? I'll be that. The ministry, I'll be that. And then all of a sudden I have all these things, and I realize I can't do this anymore. I can't carry this. And so I guess the beauty is that it wore me down to the point where I had to admit, like, I'm not okay. Whether I should be or ought to be, or because you look at your life on the outside and you go, dude, you've got steady pay. You've got a wife, you've got 3 kids, you're in a home, poor you. My dad beat me for the last 15 years, that's fair. But I guess when you get there, you kind of realize that when someone's in the fire, all they know is the fire. And there really is no benefit to trying to compare pains, Yeah. But if I hadn't gone through all that, I would have never gotten real with my mom.
Wow. which
meant, and I was crying to her and saying, I feel like I've always tried to be who you needed me to be. And I want you to get to know the real me, even if that's messy, even if that means I hurt your feelings. I want to have a real relationship with you, and I'm sorry that I didn't trust in you enough. It just never felt right. It never felt safe. I didn't feel like I could be who I am around you. But man, I walked out of there with like this freedom, like this lightness, like this shame that I've been carrying around for all these years, and this like who I had to be, lifted.
Wow.
And
Wow.
it's like when you get a taste of that, you're like, I want more of that, you know? So,
I'm curious, as someone like who might still be watching this and like laughing at people who follow God or have a relationship, like when you go, or even as someone who might just be struggling, like when you go through times in your life where you are just in some raging fire, and it's just thing after thing after thing, and you kind of call out to God, and you're like, God, I'm burnt. Like, what is going on? Like, just show up and make it all better. Like for you, like what in the world made you even like still keep relationship or belief in God going through that?
oh, I haven't. I've lost my faith countless times, you know, and it's changed and it's been redefined and it's an ongoing process. You know, it's you're wrestling with having a relationship with the ineffable, intangible, unknown, and it of course you're going to struggle with that, you know,
Yeah.
and trying to figure out what that looks like. So I haven't. I guess, what I kind of have learned, if someone did put a gun to my head and say, "What would you die for?" It sounds so corny, but it would be love. And I guess that's kind of I had a moment last October, you know, I consider like a really spiritual experience when I was on a walk and I've been really kind of frustrated and crying out to God, like, dude, I'm giving this one last shot here, you know, like I'm done making excuses, I'm done
Uh huh.
whatever, but like if there's a relationship here to be had, what more do I need to do, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And then I was having a conversation with a buddy of mine who I knew from Hollywood. We worked at a homeless outreach together, and and we were just talking about the old times we had and you know the crazy stories of like you know people trying to stab us with scissors and like people trying to do crack on the table and like you know all the funny stories and um, but we were like you know what that was holy ground to me, you know, like that was there's something in suffering that unlocks I don't know how to say God or love, but there's an invitation that can only be had through suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't fully understand how that works yet, but that's one of those things that if you ask like what do I believe, that's what I believe. And I take those verses in the Bible seriously that say things like God is love, you know. And when I look at this man in Jesus, who I'm going, he would surely be thrown out of most churches today, right? You know, because this is the guy who didn't care and would heal, who would touch the unclean, you know, because
Mm-hmm.
he saw the person. He went beyond. He didn't care about what man's rules were. He cared about connection. A man who everyone else tried to call the son of God, he called the son of man. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I think there's so much more of an invitation there into our humanity that's found in Jesus. And I think so much of Christianity or religion in general, it's not a Christian, I'm not going to single Christianity out, is like this spiritualizing and an escape from pain,
Yes.
you know, and all I see in Jesus is an invitation to it with no guarantees, with not a because you'll be saved in the end or whatever else. It's just because it's the right thing,
Yeah.
because the path of love is right.
I think that's amazing. I think it's really important to highlight what you said, where like just because someone proclaims like, oh, I love Jesus, or I follow, or I go to X church, or whatever rules we get stuck on, it's like it's not like, oh, all of a sudden I'm walking on easy street. Like life is still life. Life is hard. Life has huge obstacles. Like there's stuff that happens and I'm like, you kidding me? Are you like, is this a joke? Like, okay, but like it's almost like it's like like if you are in the right posture and like have that relationship, it's like this. It's like being stuck under waves, but you have that leash on your foot to your board, so you at least know which way is up. So even though you're getting
Right.
battered around, it's like that pointing compass of like, okay, this is the direction. So once I'm done with this, like I can like climb up and get my breath. And I think that all comes like you said, like Jesus wanted community. He wanted all of us to be open and vulnerable and not be stuck in these little boxes that we can so easily put ourselves in. And I think the church as an institution, like we were talking about before, I think loves their little boxes because it's really easy to keep things nice and clean. but God is beyond all of those realms. Just like with creativity and anything that we do to express ourselves, there's no limit on imagination and creating. So why would we put those limitations on ourselves and our relationships?
Yeah. We all do it, and I still, even knowing all this, do it. It's a way of trying to control the world around us so that we can feel like we're safe, like we're in control. I think one of the biggest moments of freedom people have is when they admit that they're helpless.
Mm-hmm.
That they are vulnerable. And furthermore, I mean, if you really think about the principles of the Bible, it's about death and resurrection. It's not about okay. Now I don't resuscitation.
Yeah. Clear.
Oh, wait, the ball there, right? But it's not about. And I was really good at kind of like playing dead. Like I would go like 90% of the way there, but I would never fully, just let go. I still was too concerned, still am too concerned in ways with image and perception and trying to control what people will think about me. I guess I'm trying to just struggle openly. Like my goal is,
sure,
if I have a platform, I want my platform to be people looking at me and going, if he can do it, I can do it.
Right? Absolutely. And I think that's the whole point of building communities and having conversations. Like for me, like if I literally could sit in front of a camera and reach out to people and talk to them, like so far, like you, Justin, and like my cousin Nicole, like I knew everyone else. Like I didn't know them. Like they were just either, and like I just had to go out of my comfort zone and reach out and then connect, and then we found this connection and had this conversation. And I think it's really important to find those connections and have deep conversations beyond the weather's nice and, oh yeah, my parents, and like there's surface level stuff. And then once you get past that, which comes with trust, obviously, but also I think knowing yourself, like you were talking about in the beginning, and knowing that your voice is important, no matter what anyone else says.
It's funny, my mom, so my brother-in-law kind of knew my mom does churchy stuff and travels, but he'd never really known. Like they kind of kept like some of like the crazy to like the DL. Like we believe in Jesus, but like prophecy and laying on hands and stuff. They kind of it's just But one time, actually, it was right when after I'd had my stroke, because his mother, who was living with us, had broken her hip, so he was in town during that. And my mom came to go visit her. So he'd never met my mom, had no context for my mom. And then hearing him talk about her afterwards, he goes, man, there's something about that woman. He goes, in 15 minutes, she went from like, hi, my name is Jeff, to like, here's my deepest, darkest struggles. And like, he's like, how does someone go from, hi, my name is, to like sharing? But it's also because she is the kind of person who's willing to be like you, like with this. How are you able to have these conversations and get somewhere so deep? Because you're creating an atmosphere of like, I'm just going to put it out there. This is who I am. I don't know you. I don't know whatever, but let's have a real conversation about life, and look what comes out of that. So I'm really proud of you, man. I think I really love, I love what you're doing. I love your heart for this. And I think it's perfect for who you are. So I think I'm really proud of it.
Oh, thanks, man. And just to throw it to the audience too, like, I'm not saying like just run up to a stranger and tell them your life story.
Sure.
'Cause 99% of the time that will not go over well, and both of you will have some kind of horrendous experience.
Oh yeah. There's definitely an overshare that can be had.
Yes.
100. I'm actually struggling with that now. In my life, I was actually talking to my therapist. Go to a therapist. They are worth it. If you find a good one, it can seriously change your life. If nothing else, you have someone you can complain to who gets paid for it.
And they won't divulge anything.
Right. On one hand, there is a healthy level of like, I don't know you. You don't need to know all my business. And there's a healthy version of that. And then you've got like the unhealthy versions where you like overshare and you're like, so when I was 5, my father touched me. Well, I'm Daniel. Hi, awkward. There is that.
Yes.
But then on the other hand, like there's the isolation, never trusting. So what do you think? How does someone find a way to have a healthy level of what that looks like when so few of us even have it modeled? I mean, what do you think? I mean, how do you? I mean, I think that's something we
It's
all struggle with.
Oh, 100%. I struggle with that big time because it wasn't until the last few years like I was able to recognize a lot of the walls I had put up to protect myself.
Yeah.
And sounds weird like for anyone who might not fully understand this, like I was just kind of working through my own just kind of emotional healing and just kind of asked God, like, what in the world is blocking me? And I just had a vision of like this like castle wall, and when you went up to the door and knocked, I was the one guarding the door and keeping
Mm.
everything out. So it was me holding up the walls and keeping the barriers. It wasn't anyone else. And
Yeah.
so I was keeping everyone else at arm's length. So for me, I've had to learn, like, I start talking to people, and then I just kind of just, I try to get to know them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, beyond how's your day and everything, I just ask them legitimate questions of what I would like to know about them and what,
Right.
makes them them, and just share a little bit about myself. And if they're receptive and it's like this thing that clicks, then I don't mind just continually going further and further. Um, and then, like, usually I don't mind on certain things where you build that rapport and I'm like, hey, I have this stuff I would love to share with you. It's personal. Is that something you're comfortable with? Because there's some people that are dealing with their own stuff or might be in a frame of mind at that particular moment that can't
Right.
handle anything. And it's
Sure.
nothing against you. It's nothing against them. It's just like us. We can only handle so much in a day.
Yeah.
So depending on where they're at and then where you're at, like sometimes certain conversations might have to be shelved.
I like that. I think that would be a great. I think it's something I'm going to try and to take into practice in my own life because it's not like a wrong or a right. It's really in the moment because it could be
Mm-hmm.
like, hey man, I love you, but I just like I got so much on my plate right now. I can't walk this out with you right now. But I love kind of the invitation or the asking, the consent, before
Yes.
kind of sharing. But really,
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, there has to be double consent for that, just like with most anything else. So, and if you do, like, there are those moments, like you're saying, where we struggle and we either overshare or do something like that. And if the person isn't as receptive, just try to just take a moment, take like a mental break, and just be like, okay, like, it's not 100% like them. You didn't do anything 100% wrong. It's just in that moment, like it wasn't supposed to go
right.
there. So like, don't shy away from sharing or trying to get close to someone. Just try to like notice like, okay, this was one of those moments. Now I know moving forward, like this is how I can try to up my conversation.
Yeah, what I like the most about that is you're connecting with them as a human,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and not as a collection of ideas. Because a lot of us like, it's kind of the perfect storm of a us versus them narrative that's being created. Not just in America, but all over the world. That that we literally created a system that profits when we are divisive. And everything has to fit into 10-second sound bites, and it's just a bunch of I heard someone say recently, and this is important to realize because a lot of people they'll be like, "Oh, I used to be a Christian and now I'm this," but you still in the same trap.
Yeah.
You're you still feel like you're in a position of where you need to punish someone for their actions. You're still creating an us versus them narrative. Now you're just in a different us versus them. Maybe you switch sides, maybe you're something else, but like that's not what I see Jesus doing.
Nope.
It wasn't like he would just it was whomever the person was. Like I think Jesus would love a Trump supporter. I think Jesus would love someone who had an abortion. I think Jesus would, and not just like, well, I tolerate you because I
Yeah.
see best in you, but like I like you.
And not only do I like and I love you, I know you.
Yes, you
I
are not.
know you, which is huge. Because going back to our original conversation of just, you have that inner narrative of yourself. And if someone speaks against that, you're just like, and it's almost like this like vulnerable attack. Like, I'm not good. I'm not this. I'm not that person. I don't do this. Like, and you have all these comparisons and lies and just all this stuff built on. But if someone can help start removing those one by one, and then you're able to just kind of see that vulnerable self, like, it's, man, That
Yeah.
is transformational. And just to know, like you said, it's not us against anyone. I don't care what your belief system is, what your economical background is. I don't care where you, like, whatever
Yeah.
that is. Like, it's so weird when people are like, oh, they did that, so I'm against them. It's no, it's how about you try to understand why they're doing what they're doing or where their mindset comes from and understand them and get to know them. You don't have to be best friends with someone to do that. You don't have to invite them over for dinner and like all of a sudden it's this big commitment. It's just trying to be able to have a different perspective and understand where people are coming from so you can have that compassion and grace to then just either move on or try to start an actual connection.
Yeah, I think that's really being willing to understand that we have a flawed perception. Like when I was having that conversation with my mom, and I was saying, you've got these verses like eyes to see and ears to hear, and I said, and we go, well, that's them, not us, that's them. And I go, Mom, I don't see if Christianity or religion is a promise to attain a higher level of holiness or whatever, it doesn't bear out in the stats. I said, look, if that's the case, then shouldn't we be out there actually saving the world? And, whatever else? It's not happening. It's not happening. I said, we have a religion where we sit and listen to someone for an hour once a week talk about love. He's talking about. So it's like sending someone, instead of going to a baseball game, we just sit around and read stats, It's like, but do you know the feeling of like the bat in your hand and the crack and the, it's like, I guess it's being willing to actually really commit instead of only going so far that you kind of play the part or play dead. It's willing to go all the way. Yeah. And I think the only way we fight that so hard, I think the only way to do that is to go through suffering, because no one's going to do that on their own. It's terrifying.
Yeah.
I'm terrified right now, man, because I'm at this point where I'm realizing not only do my mom and I have differences, that's fine, but like I'm going to be taking a stand for what I believe in, just like she is. And I see that there are areas where I could understand how it could appear to be a conflicting narrative, and I grew up with a very controversial mom. I grew up with a woman in the 80s in the Bible Belt in Texas, a little town in Texas, who was saying, like, not only am I going to speak, but I'm going to lay hands on people. I'm going to speak in tongues. I'm going to prophesy. I'm going to talk about demons, Obviously not a good look when you're like 6 in I grew up in a very small town just outside of Fort Worth named Weatherford, Texas. The kind of like Friday Night Lights town where everything shuts down for homecoming and everyone has the mom that's like down to their ankle. That was, and then I have this mom who's now kind of getting notoriety, and even to this day, seeing how much flack and all the things she took, and then also remembering the toll that took on me. I've been a little bit hesitant to pay the price, not for me, but for my kids, because I don't want them to have to pay the price for what I believe, So it's being willing to be misunderstood, because I know if we reduce what the conversation that you and I have had over like an hour or whatever and put it on and reduce it down to a narrative, like I guess I'm kind of gearing up to be called, all sorts of names by people, and realizing that me just saying I don't know, guys, means that I don't fit in the world that I used to belong in anymore. It's so much easier and less dramatic than what I'm saying compared to the reality, but I feel it's almost like coming out. It's like, hey guys, I don't know if I believe like you guys do. Are we still friends? Then getting up and then being like, by the way, I'm going to say that from the pulpit. You cool? It's like, how do you?
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think none of us do, though. That's the thing, is everyone's sitting around waiting till it's like we're so, especially in the Christian whatever world, so conditioned to like it's going to happen, God's going to do it, just seek and pray, and it's like, but you're not actually taking any action. Like you're spiritualizing being terrified because you don't want to take the wrong step, because if you take the wrong step, you might risk God's judgment, and if you risk God's judgment, you get off the path, and it's like what are you called to do? Are you called to love people? Okay, well then maybe you are called to love tens of millions. Maybe you're like called like my mom level, where it's like you're going to reach the nations or whatever. But who's around? What my mom does that really surprised me when I tried to kind of reverse engineer what makes you special. I was like, how much has your mentality changed from like that small town Texas mom to this,
Mm-hmm.
amazing whatever? And she goes, honestly, I'm just doing the same stuff. She's like, and I'm doing the same stuff I do everywhere, like, uh, she is that every time it's like wherever she goes in life, she's like looking like, who's that person? Who needs love? Who needs a word? Who needs something right now?
Mm-hmm.
So she really lives like that, and not, it's not a pulpit thing. It's not a whatever. So I was like, wow, that's right.
I think that's really good, and
Yeah.
I think it's good to point out, like you said, like your mom is called to reach huge stages. Not like I think one thing, especially in church, but I think this is just common across just people, is
Sure.
we all want to be that hero, the person that's called, the one the one to change the galaxy, like like you're the only one that can do this, and we always have this grandiose version of that, and it's like if you look at anyone great in history, biblically or not, they always have the people, their support system there, and to uplift them. And I don't think anyone who's called to do that can do that without a strong support system. And I think some
Can't.
people, like myself, I don't think I'm called to like reach this like global thing. Like I don't like for me it's just if I could reach 5 people and have them just have an amazing experience, like oh my goodness, like that's for me that's insane.
Yeah.
So I think it's like have perspective of just knowing like just have that heart of like I literally like I just want to serve whoever is around me, whoever is put in front of me, and then as that multiplies or grows, then just keep doing the same thing. But
Yeah.
sometimes and in some seasons we're called to support others, and in others people are called to support us. It's not
Yeah.
one or the other. It's an ebb and flow. And I think if you're
Yeah.
stuck in this mentality of like I have to be like the next Spielberg or Billy Graham or whatever, like if you're stuck in that mentality and not realizing all the other opportunities that are around you, then I think you really miss out on a lot.
Yeah, I hear you, man. I think that's kind of what I had to even go through because I was kind of, if you look at my path beforehand, I had kind of just stepped away from everything, and I was like, I'm just going to kind of build my whatever. And then when I made the decision to do this, and I'm like, I'm going to go work for mommy and daddy, and I'm like, whatever, 33 at the time, 34, and I'm like, what am I doing, like, and then how am I ever going to get back into my career? I'm like, I've been out 6 years, if I ever do. But man, making that choice and then serving someone else's mission and being like, until I'm not going to walk away until I see them understand what they do and how they do it better, and then how to grow in that.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'm not moving on, and I've learned so much more. I'm so much more rounded as a person, as a leader, because of all the opportunities that I've had that most people will never have.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very. I mean, I got to grow up traveling the world. Whatever else I could say about like, oh, Christianity, this or that, it's allowed me to see the world. Um, Even if, for whatever else, I've seen people intentionally trying to connect. I've seen people who
Mm-hmm.
are seeking after something that is beyond themselves, that is beyond their own benefit, putting other people first. So many of the spiritual practices will always be a part of my life. Um, the story that is created throughout the Bible of this unknown God who wants to make himself known to mankind, and uh, it's just a beautiful thing. So I never want to. I always hope that even if I don't agree with the world that I've come from, I hope it feels like a love letter. Like I
Mm-hmm.
hope they know, like I'm saying this because I love you. I'm not even expecting you to agree, but I love you enough to be willing to show you who I really am. Not because I think it can change you, because I can't change anyone, but because
Yeah,
I'm willing to risk being rejected by you to connect with you as a human.
I like that. I think that's a big. I think sacrifice like that is one of the biggest acts of love someone could do.
Yeah. My dad always has this statement that gets stuck in my head. It's what's in your hands. And if I look at my life over the last couple of years, it's like, what's in my hands? It's really like I have suffering in my hands. And that sounds like silly. It's like, how do I offer that to someone? But I say that to say, if anyone who may have stumbled upon this, and you are at that place where uh, you've lost hope, and you feel broken, and you feel lost, and everyone's trying to give you answers and opinions, and you don't feel seen, and you don't feel known, and you don't know if you're gonna make it. Um, Keep going. Just hang on. There is hope. And I don't know why we have to suffer. Um, I wish I could take it away, but I really believe there's an invitation to be found in that suffering that you can't get anywhere else. There's something of the divine there for you. So I don't know why we have the dark nights of the soul or go through the desert, but trust me, there will come a day when you'll know you're nearly on the other side, because you'll learn to love the desert. So hang on. Don't give up. Find community. Find your people. And just know that whatever the purpose, make the purpose. Take your suffering, take your pain that you're going through, and all the questions you'd ask, and find someone else just like you who needs to hear that. And just keep hanging on.
Man, thank you, Daniel, so much for sharing your heart. This has been powerful. Man, your voice is important. You're important. And I know this is going to help someone. So I just thank you. If someone's watching this and they kind of want to follow your journey and just kind of see what you're doing and just connect, where can someone follow you?
Sure. I mean, basically, the really only active platform I have at the moment is Instagram, and that's Daniel Patrick Jacobs.
Okay. And I'll post that in the description for anyone who wants to connect or follow. And just, yeah, thank you again, man, for being so open and sharing, because that's what this is all about.
Awesome. Definitely, man. I'm proud of what you're doing, and keep going.
Thanks, man. I'll catch you next time.